The day Raymond Cole was buried, it rained. Not the kind of rain that makes you pull your coat tighter and walk faster. The slow kind. The kind that soaks through everything, through wool, through skin, through whatever resolve you thought you had walking into that morning. 312 people came to his funeral. I counted them in the photographs later. 312 people who dressed in black, drove across town, and sat in wooden pews to say goodbye to a man they believed they knew. The flowers alone cost £4,000. White lilies. His favorite. Patricia had insisted. The pastor had been speaking for 22 minutes when it happened. 22 minutes of a good man's life reduced to its best moments. The teaching career, the counsel work, the youth mentoring program, the Sunday services he never missed, the way he shook your hand with both of his and made you feel like the only person in the room. 22 minutes. And then a woman in the back row stood up. She was not a family member. She was not a neighbor. She was not listed anywhere in the order of service. Nobody in that room could tell you her name. Nobody had seen her walk in. She had simply appeared, quietly, deliberately, sometime before the service began, and taken the last seat in the last row closest to the door. She had a manila envelope in her left hand. And as the pastor spoke the words, "Raymond Cole leaves behind a legacy of honesty and integrity that this community will carry forever," she began to walk. By the time this story is finished, you will understand exactly why she chose that sentence. That specific sentence. That specific moment. But first, you need to understand who Raymond Cole actually was.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
Raymond Arthur Cole was born in 1962 in a two-bedroom terraced house on Millbrook Road. He was the second of 3 children. His father worked at the post office for 31 years. His mother cleaned offices until her knees gave out. They were not a wealthy family. They were not a connected family. What they were, by every account, was a decent one. And Raymond carried that decency like a badge. He trained as a secondary school teacher in his early 20s. History and English. He spent 19 years at St. Edmund's Comprehensive, which is the kind of school where the staff turnover runs at about 40% a year, because the work is hard and the pay is modest and the pastoral load will grind most people into dust within a decade. Raymond stayed for 19 years. His former students, and I spoke with several of them in preparing this story, described him with a consistency that is rare when you're researching someone's reputation. Usually, when you dig into a man's legacy, you find contradictions. People who loved him. People who found him difficult. People who were indifferent. With Raymond, the word that kept coming back was steady. He was steady. He was there. He remembered your name the following September. He turned up to your football match even when he wasn't required to. He wrote references for students who had no one else to write them. He stayed late. He came in early. He did the thing that most people decide, eventually, is not their job. When he left teaching, he moved into local politics. Became a counselor. Sat on the planning committee, the housing committee, the community outreach board. He chaired the annual fundraising drive for the local food bank for 11 consecutive years. He organized the youth mentoring program that, by the time of his death, had matched over 200 young men from disadvantaged backgrounds with professional mentors in the area. He was the kind of man that other men point to when they are trying to explain to their own children what a good life looks like. His wife, Patricia, had known him since they were 23. They met at a church social. They married 2 years later. They had 3 children, Thomas, Rachel, and James. 4 grandchildren between them. By every external measurement, Raymond Cole was exactly what his eulogy said he was. So let me tell you about the locked drawer. It was in the bottom left corner of his study desk. An old partner's desk, solid mahogany, the kind that weighs so much that the 2 men who delivered it in 1998 had to rest halfway up the stairs. Patricia had never thought twice about that desk. It was Raymond's space. She had her kitchen, he had his study. That was the arrangement, and it had always worked. The bottom left drawer had a small brass lock. Raymond had explained it, early in their marriage, as the place he kept confidential counsel files. Documents that were not for public circulation. Patricia had accepted this without question because it was plausible, and because she trusted him, and because she was not, by her own description, a suspicious woman. In 34 years of marriage, she had never once asked to see inside that drawer. The second thing she had not questioned was the mobile phone. She had seen it once, an older handset, a model she didn't recognize, charging on the floor behind his bedside table. She had mentioned it. He had said it was an old work phone he used occasionally for council correspondence because the signal on his main phone was poor in certain parts of the building. She had nodded. She had walked out of the room. She had never seen it again after that, which meant he had moved it somewhere she wouldn't. She had not thought to ask where. The third thing, and this is the one that would become significant later, legally and financially, was the money. Patricia had not managed the household finances in their marriage. Raymond handled everything. Not in a controlling way, she would later tell people, just in the way that one person in most marriages ends up being the one who does the banking and pays the bills and knows what the standing orders are. Raymond was organized. He liked the numbers to be in order. She had appreciated that about him. What she had not seen, what she had no reason to look for, were the cash withdrawals. Between 400 and 800 pounds. Every 3 weeks. For 6 years. Regular enough to be intentional. Irregular enough in the exact amount to avoid pattern detection on a casual glance at a bank statement. Whoever had set up that withdrawal schedule had understood, on some level, how to not be found. And for 6 years it worked. Then Raymond Cole had a cardiac arrest in his study chair at 5:47 in the morning on September the 12th, and the question of what he had been doing with that money died with him. Or so everyone thought. We are back in the church now. The woman is walking. She has made it past the third row from the back. Nobody has stopped her. Nobody has spoken. The murmuring has started, that low, confused sound that a crowd makes when something is happening that it has no script for. The pastor has stopped mid-sentence. His hand is still raised from a gesture he never finished. Patricia is in the front row. She became aware of the commotion at roughly the same time as everyone else. Her daughter Rachel, sitting to her left, gripped her arm. Patricia did not turn around immediately. She told herself afterward that she didn't know why. Maybe some part of her, some quiet animal part of her that had been ignoring things for 34 years, already knew that whatever was coming down that aisle was meant for her. The woman reached the pulpit steps. She was in her mid-40s. Dark coat. Dark hair pulled back. No jewelry. No handbag. Nothing except the manila envelope and whatever she had folded into her coat pocket. She climbed the 2 steps without hesitation. The pastor stepped back. She set the envelope on the lectern. She adjusted the microphone to her height, which is when Patricia finally turned around, because the sound of that microphone adjustment carried across 312 silent people like a gunshot. And the woman spoke. Her voice was calm. That is the detail that has stayed with me the most in researching this story. Every witness I spoke to mentioned it. Not angry. Not tearful. Not triumphant. Calm, in the way that only someone who has spent a very long time making peace with something can be calm. She said, I didn't come here to destroy anything. What's already destroyed can't be broken twice. She paused. She looked at the front row. She said, I came because his children deserve to know they have a brother. I came because my son deserves to know his father existed. And I came because if this room is going to call a man a saint, someone who was in this room needed to stand up and say, I knew a different man. She opened the envelope. Inside were 43 letters. Handwritten. The earliest dated 7 years prior to Raymond's death. The most recent dated 11 days before it. Love letters, but more than love letters. Among them were hotel booking confirmations, wire transfer receipts, a lease agreement for a flat in a neighboring town in Raymond's name, and a birth certificate. A birth certificate for a boy named Marcus, 6 years old at the time of his father's death. Listed father, Raymond Arthur Cole. The woman's name was Diane. She had known Raymond for 9 years. She had been in love with him for 7 of them. She had believed, for most of those 7 years, that Raymond was managing a complicated situation and would eventually resolve it. He had told her many times in many of those 43 letters that he was going to do the right thing. He was working up to it. He needed more time. He needed the children to be a little older. He needed the council election to be done. He always needed one more thing to be done first. And then his heart stopped and the time ran out and the right thing was never done. Diane continued. She said, I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not asking for your understanding. I'm asking you, all of you, to look at these letters. And then I'm asking you to go home and look in the bottom left drawer of his study desk. She looked directly at Patricia. Just for a moment. Just long enough. She said, what's in there doesn't belong to the dead. It belongs to the living. She placed the open envelope on the lectern. She came back down the 2 steps. She walked the full length of the aisle again back toward the doors. Nobody stopped her. Nobody spoke. A child in the 3rd row coughed, and in that silence it sounded enormous. The doors at the back of the church opened. Closed. She was gone. For approximately 40 seconds, nobody in that room moved. Patricia would later describe those 40 seconds as the longest of her life. Not because she didn't know what to do. Because she already knew, somewhere in that part of her that had always known, that what Diane had said was true. She didn't need to see the letters. She didn't need to see the birth certificate. She could feel the truth of it settling over that church like the rain that had been falling all morning. The pastor did not resume the service. People began to leave. Raymond Cole's coffin remained at the front of the church, surrounded by 4,000 pounds worth of white lilies, while 312 people filed quietly out into the rain. The burial was postponed. By 3:15 that afternoon, the funeral reception had been cancelled. Patricia's sister had driven her home. The three children, Thomas, Rachel, and James, arrived at the family house within the hour. Nobody ate. Nobody spoke much. The kettle was boiled and reboiled and the tea sat in mugs going cold on the kitchen counter because nobody was actually drinking it. Rachel was the one who called the police. Not to report Diane, there was nothing illegal in what Diane had done. She had walked into a public church service and spoken. She had not threatened anyone. She had not broken anything. Rachel called the police because the letters contained a reference to a property, a flat in Raymond's name in a neighboring town, that Patricia knew nothing about. That flat, if it existed, was part of Raymond's estate. And if Raymond had been paying rent on it or owned it outright, that affected everything that came next legally. A detective came to the house at 5:40. He was there for about an hour. He explained that this was a civil matter, primarily, an estate issue, and not a criminal investigation. He took a copy of the birth certificate. He made some notes. He told Patricia to contact a solicitor first thing Monday morning and suggested she not touch anything in Raymond's study until she had legal advice on what belonged to her estate and what might be contested. Patricia thanked him and closed the door and stood in her hallway for a very long time. At some point during the late afternoon, someone in that congregation took a photograph. Not during Diane's speech, during the walk. The long walk down the aisle. Just Diane's back, the envelope, the rows of stunned faces watching her go. Whoever took it posted it to the local community Facebook group at around 6 in the evening with no caption whatsoever. By 10 o'clock that night it had been shared over 3,000 times. The comments split almost immediately into two camps. On one side, how dare she? A funeral is sacred. A man cannot defend himself from the grave. Whatever he did, whatever the truth was, there is a time and a place in a church on the day of burial is neither. On the other side, she had every right. Patricia had a right to know. Marcus had a right to exist in the open. The community had been deceived, and the church was precisely the place where a lie about a man's integrity should be confronted, because that is where the lie was being told. The argument ran through the night and into the following day and the following week, and if you look for it, it is still running now. The church issued a statement. It expressed sympathy for the Cole family. It asked for privacy and dignity. It did not mention Diane's name. It did not acknowledge that a 6-year-old boy named Marcus existed. It did not address the question of whether the eulogy, which it had sanctioned, had been, in any meaningful sense, accurate. None of this is remarkable. Institutions protect themselves. That is what they do. What is remarkable is what happened at 11:47 that night. Thomas, Raymond's eldest son, 31 years old, a quiet man by all accounts, not given to dramatics, went back to the church alone. He had left something behind in the chaos of the afternoon. His father's order of service. He had wanted it. He told me later that he couldn't explain rationally why he needed to go back for a printed piece of paper. He just knew he did. The church was unlocked. The caretaker was still there cleaning up the flowers. Thomas sat in the front pew for about 20 minutes, alone in the empty church with his father's photograph still propped on the easel at the front. He told me he did not pray. He is not a religious man. He just sat there. He said it was the only 20 minutes that day where he felt like he could breathe. Then he went home. And the family did not sleep. And in the morning, Patricia went to the study. The drawer was locked. But Raymond's keys were in the plastic bag that the hospital had returned with his personal effects, and it had taken Patricia less than 10 minutes of searching to find the small brass key on the ring. She opened the drawer. Inside were 2 manila folders. Not council files. There had never been council files in that drawer. The first folder was labeled with a single letter, M. Inside it were birthday cards. Father's Day cards. Drawings on folded pieces of A4 paper, the kind a child makes when they are 4, 5, 6 years old. Lopsided suns. Houses with too many windows. A crayon drawing of a man and a small boy holding hands under a rainbow. Written in an adult hand at the bottom of each drawing, in the same handwriting as the letters. Marcus made this for you. The boy had known Raymond as Uncle Ray. He had not known, in the way that a 6-year-old cannot know, that the man he called Uncle Ray was his father. Diane had made that choice, to wait until Marcus was older, to let Raymond be the one to tell him, to not force a conversation that Raymond had always promised was coming. Raymond had visited Marcus 11 times in the last year of his life. Diane had kept a record. Patricia sat with that folder for a long time. Then she opened the second one. It was labeled with her name. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Long. Both sides of 4 sheets of paper, in Raymond's careful, small handwriting. Dated 8 months before his death. Raymond had known his heart was failing. He had received the diagnosis privately, had told no one, not Patricia, not his children, not Diane, and had decided to use whatever time he had left to put his affairs in order in a way that would cause the least possible harm once he was gone. He had believed, or had told himself he believed, that discovering the truth through a letter after his death would be easier than being told the truth while he was alive. The letter contained everything. The full account of 9 years. How he had met Diane. How he had told himself in the beginning that it was temporary, that he would end it, that it was a mistake, that it would not become what it became. How it had become exactly what it became, despite everything he had told himself. How Diane had told him she was pregnant, and how he had not left Patricia, and how he had not left Diane either, and how he had convinced himself that providing for both of them was a form of doing the right thing, when in reality it was simply the architecture of a man who did not have the courage to make a choice. He had set up a private trust, funded by 6 years of those cash withdrawals. 400 to 800 pounds, every 3 weeks, quietly removed from the joint account and deposited into a separate account in his name only, which had been used to fund the trust. By the time of his death, the trust contained £74,000. It was structured to release funds for Marcus's education and living costs until the boy turned 25. Diane had not known the precise figure. She had known the trust existed because Raymond had told her, but not what it contained, and not whether it would survive the legal complexities of his estate. Raymond had arranged as best he could, for his son to be provided for after his death. He had not arranged to tell his wife while he was living. The letter ended with these words, and I want to give them to you exactly as Patricia read them, because I think they are the most important words in this entire story. By the time you read this, I will have run out of courage again. I spent my whole life being the steady one, the reliable one, the man who showed up. I showed up for everyone except the moment that required the most of me. I'm sorry I was not brave enough to say this while I was alive. I know that sorry on paper from a dead man is worth very little. But it is all I have left to give you, and I give it without reservation. Patricia folded the letter. Put it back in the folder. Put the folder back in the drawer. Closed it. She sat at Raymond's desk for 2 hours without moving. And here is the thing that I keep returning to, the detail that I cannot resolve no matter how many times I turn it over. If Diane had not walked to that pulpit, if she had stayed in her seat, if she had let the burial happen, if she had trusted that Patricia would eventually find the drawer and the letter and the truth would surface on its own, Patricia would have found it. Maybe that same evening. Maybe the following week. She would have found it. Raymond had planned for her to find it. Diane did not know about the letter. She did not know that the drawer contained a full confession, a set of birthday cards, and a trust fund already structured in her son's name. She walked to that pulpit because she did not trust that the truth would find its way out on its own. She walked because she had waited 9 years for Raymond to do the right thing and he had died before he did it, and she was not prepared to wait any longer. And she was both right and wrong at the same time. Right because the truth needed to come out. Wrong, perhaps, in the timing, because the letter existed, the drawer existed, and the truth was already 3 inches of mahogany away from coming out on its own terms. Or maybe not wrong at all. Because what if Patricia had never looked in the drawer? What if grief had sealed that study for months? What if the solicitor had missed it? What if Marcus had grown up with a trust fund he couldn't trace and a father he never knew? I don't have the answer to that. I don't think anyone does. Because monsters are easy. You distance yourself from a monster. You say, I would never. You say, I am nothing like that. And you move on. But a man who does genuine good in the world and genuine harm in private, a man whose courage failed him only in the moments that mattered most, that is a different thing entirely. That is something most of us, if we are honest with ourselves, can find some thread of in our own lives. A hard conversation we avoided. A truth we delivered too late. A letter we should have sent while we were still alive enough to hand it over in person. Raymond Cole just scaled his version of it to a degree that caught up with him in the worst possible way. Now, Diane. Was she right to do what she did? I've thought about this for a long time and I want to give you the honest answer, which is, I don't know. And I don't think a clean answer exists. She walked into a room of 312 people who were in the middle of a ritual of grief. A ritual that those people needed, that Patricia needed, that Raymond's children needed, and she interrupted it. She delivered truth in the least gentle possible way, at the least gentle possible moment. And the truth needed to come out. Both of those things are true at the same time. And the fact that they are both true at the same time is exactly why this story is still being argued about wherever it's discussed. There is an argument, a real one, not a dismissive one, that says, there was a drawer. There was a letter. There was a solicitor who would have been instructed to administer the estate, and the trust would have surfaced, and the truth would have come out within weeks. The church did not need to be that moment. Patricia did not need to learn, in front of 300 people, that her marriage was not what she thought it was. She could have learned in private, with her children around her, with time to breathe before she had to face anyone. That argument has weight. I cannot dismiss it. And then there is the other argument, which says, Diane had waited 9 years for Raymond to do the right thing while he was alive. She had watched him be eulogized as a man of integrity in a room full of people who believed it. She had a 6-year-old son who did not know who his father was. She had no guarantee, none, that the drawer would be opened, that the letter would be found, that it wouldn't be boxed up and put in storage and discovered years later or never. She had no reason to trust that the truth would surface on its own, because the truth had been failing to surface on its own for 9 years. That argument also has weight. I think this is one of those stories where the right answer depends entirely on what you believe the purpose of truth is. If you believe truth is owed to the living regardless of the cost of delivering it, then Diane was right. If you believe that truth delivered with no mercy is simply cruelty wearing truth's clothing, then she was wrong. If you believe, as I think I do, that both things can be true at the same time, then you are left where I am left. Sitting with a story that has no clean ending, no clear hero, and no villain you can comfortably hate. Which is, of course, the only kind of story that is actually true. Here is the question I am leaving you with. Not the simple version. Not was she right or was she wrong. The real version. If you were Patricia, would you want her to have done what she did? And if you were Marcus, would you want her to have done what she did? And if those two answers are different, and I suspect for most of you they will be, then sit with the gap between them. Because that gap is not a flaw in your thinking. That gap is the truth of this situation. That gap is where all the actual moral weight of this story lives. Raymond Cole is buried now. The bench is gone. The letters are wherever Patricia decided to put them. Marcus is 7 years old and does not yet know the full shape of who his father was. He will one day. He will read the cards his father kept. He will understand the trust. He will learn, in whatever words Diane finds when the time comes, the story I have just told you. And whatever he makes of it, whatever verdict he reaches on the man who called himself Uncle Ray and sat in that locked drawer with a stack of birthday cards and a letter he left too late, that verdict is the only one, in the end, that truly matters. The rest of us are just watching. And trying as best we can, to decide what we would have done differently.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.